open admiration before we begin with the formalities of what we are for today. But I'm a big fan of yours and a huge admirer of yours. And then I send this across all the sociology groups. The allegations that have come to Vinita Singh are you becoming a feminist? Are you becoming a leftist? And in Hindi, the word that was used is Vampanthi. I didn't know the term also. I went to the dictionary.
Vampanthi means leftist. That is leftist.
I went and I looked for the meaning, exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Yes, the things I feel for, I'm vocal. And after my research work, till date, I feel, ma'am, that if I cannot make a difference in the lives of people, are they, as academicians, what do we do? We are only writing and researching and getting the our promotions and our salary.
Yeah.
That activism in me is growing more and more, and the anger in me. The more I'm maturing, the more my hair is whitening, the fear of losing something, some position, something in the family, something my job. That is, I'm outgrowing those barriers, and it's a journey which I'm experiencing from Randhir's age till this age, from when I was of his age and my travel. And day by day, I'm getting more and more vocal and fearless. And I don't fear anything now. Except God, I'm not scared of speaking the truth.
That is the strength of women's studies and women's movement. We are product of street fighting. So first 30 years of my life was nothing but women's movement. And then we got into this thing much later. In the 21st century, we became academicians. But first 40 years were only in the women's movement. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All have come. All have come. All have joined.
Yes. I think all have joined. Indu Singh will join later. Because of, and Chanda ma'am is there. Ruchi madam is there.
Ruchi ma'am is also there. Correct.
Yes. So I request respected participants to kindly mute themselves so that we can avoid disruptions.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's begin the session with a beautiful invocation of a song composed by one of my friends and sung by me. So let me share the screen. Just wait a minute.
हो जो अपनी जाति को तुम कमजोर मानती हो, अधिकार है जो तेरे उनको न जानती हो। तूफा को मोड़ दे तो जो राह चल रहा है, मेरी बहनों जागो अब जमाना बदल रहा है। चिंतन ये मेरे मन में दिन रात चल रहा है सृष्टि की तू जननी, तू मार्गदर्शिका है। भगवान को भी तूने इस कोख से जना है। संसार को तुझी से संसार मिल रहा है। मेरी बहनों जागो जमाना बदल रहा है। अब जागो बहनों जागो, सब रूढ़ियां मिटा दो। अपनी प्रभुत्वता से जग को नई दिशा दो। जागो बहनों जागो, सब रूढ़ियां मिटा दो। अपनी प्रबुद्धता से जग को नई दिशा दो। अज्ञान का अंधेरा सच को निगल रहा है। अज्ञान का अंधेरा सच को निकल रहा है। मेरी बहन जागो, अब जमाना बदल रहा है। चिंता।
So, thank you so much for your kind attention, and really it's a very good song. And thank you so much, Dr. Devendra, for singing. Dr. Suniti Madan, she also sent one audio for this webinar. So let me just share screen. Yes. So let me play audio of her voice.
मैं लौ हूँ, मैं ज्योति हूँ, मैं ज्वाला हूँ, मैं अग्नि हूँ, मैं जननी हूँ, मैं दुर्गा हूँ, मैं शक्ति हूँ, मैं मुक्ति हूँ, मैं स्वाधीन हूँ, मैं सशक्त हूँ, मैं विद्या हूँ, मैं स्वाभिमानी हूँ, मैं मणि हूँ, मैं परवीन हूँ, मैं स्वाति हूँ, मैं इति हूँ, मैं कांति हूँ, मैं कीर्ति हूँ, मैं क्रांति हूँ, मैं आंधी हूँ, मैं शांति हूँ, मैं शीतल, मैं हिमानी हूँ, मैं भवानी हूँ, मैं हठ हूँ, मैं सब्र हूँ, मैं दिव्य हूँ, मैं अब्र हूँ, मैं सहनी हूँ, मैं सुहानी हूँ, मैं मोहनी हूँ, मैं रूहानी हूँ, मैं चंडी हूँ, मैं नंदी हूँ, मैं कालिंदी हूँ, आनंदी हूँ, मैं माया हूँ, मैं सरमाया हूँ, मैं ख्याति हूँ, मैं सुनीति हूँ, मैं।
Thank you so much for your kind attention, and thank you, Dr. Suniti Patel. She's a very famous Suniti Madan. I'm sorry. She's a very famous poet, academics, and educationist from Chandigarh. So, namaste. Thank you so much for joining us in this very beautiful evening. I, Randhir Kumar Gautam, on behalf of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences of Raffles University, welcome you. I also welcome you being a co-nurturer of Viswanidhan Center for Asian Blossoming and Raise Global Foundation, USA. It's a great pleasure and indeed an honor to have available with us distinguished honorable speakers. First, I would like to welcome guest of honor, Professor Vibhuti Patel. She does not need any introduction at all. She is from Tata School of Social Science, Mumbai. She is former professor at Center for Social Study, Social Exclusion, and she also chaired as a position of head of the Department of Economics, very famous revolutionary SNDP, Women's University, Mumbai. In this session, the chair will be session by Professor Vinita Singh, head of the Department of Sociology, Ranchi Women's College, Ranchi. We are also joined by Dr. Ruchi Goswami, Associate Professor of Journalism and founder and director of Diwani, a social welfare unit. We will also joined by later Indu Sahu, Chairperson, Chetna Child and Welfare Society, Raipur, Chhattisgarh. I welcome Ms. Chanda Asani, Vice President, Himalayan TT College. I would like to extend my warm welcome to our Chief Patron, Honorable Justice Dr. Meena Bombar, former Chief Justice of Rajasthan High Court, and all the respected participants, viewers, listeners, and speakers. Thank you so much for joining. Silliman once said, while there is now a widespread understanding of NGOs should play an active role in enabling civil society, the definitions and functions remains contested. We live in a time where there is significant growing role of NGO in politics and society, but the understanding of NGO is very complex and contested. With the advent of deep globalizing process, there have become more internationalized and fall in the context of neoliberal practices. The consequences are manifested in terms of delimitation of key responsibilities of non-governmental organizations, including women's NGO in the area of poverty, education, and health. We know and we acknowledge the transformation of politics and the rise of NGOs have significant impact on society, be it feminist movement, transgender movement, LGBT rights movement, and environmental movement. Somewhere I read the achievement of NGO lies in revolutionary change, but in exploiting the range of opportunity created by incomplete transition. If you talk about a waste from transition from mass society to post-industrial society or fourth stage of globalization, in the context of Africa, from authoritarianism to semi-democracy, in the context of India, democratic nationalism to Mediterranean or crony capitalist nationalism, and from international relations and global politics in wider world. With this brief introduction, we are having multiplicity of perspective soon, because I have invited not only academics, but also activists, persons who dedicated their lives in NGO sector, like Indu Sahu, and also academics like Vinita Singh ma'am and Vibhuti Patel ma'am. So first I would like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel to kindly give a brief context of today's session. Ma'am, over to you. You are muted, ma'am. Kindly unmute.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So thank you, Dr. Randir Kumar Gautam, first of all, for inviting me to give this brief background on scope and opportunities for women in NGO sector in India, and also to share the podium with Professor Vinita Singh, Dr. Ruchi Goswami, Dr. Indu Sahu, Professor Chanda Asani, my co-traveler in women's movement for last 3 decades, and Chief Guest Madam Deepika Dave. I think we all know that in response of current health emergency and the related human miseries due to lockdown and social isolation imposed by the coronavirus pandemic, NGOs have played a very dominant role in disaster management and also social solidarity. The way they ran the community kitchens, provided support to migrant workers who were walking for miles together, and also negotiated with the government structures and provided temporary succour to the aggrieved human beings. So I think once again the discourse on non-government organizations, civil society organization, community-based organizations have taken a center stage, not only in India, but all 191 countries where COVID virus had played havoc. the fear of NGOization of civil society, which was a very fashionable theme right from 2000 to 2018. I think that people are revisiting that theme, because had there not been NGOs, who would have played such an important role of intervention, timely intervention, transcending coronaphobia and reaching out to the people who were under tremendous multiple whammies of health emergency, as well as loss of livelihood and loss of even shelter for most of the migrant workers. Now, if we see the genesis of NGOs, the social movements, I am a product of social movement of 1970s. Okay, I entered the women's students movement, youth movement, and later on women's movement. By 1972, I was in it. So from 1970s and 1980s, what was considered to be a voluntary organizations, or the students organization, tribal organization, Dalit organizations, which also started in the 70s in whole of Western India, and also organizations of youth and special interest organizations of writers and filmmaker, revolutionary filmmakers and all. So that created a new kind of governance challenge to the existing governance structure. And what we saw that these social movements, which was for 20 years was just fighting from the street, they started getting consolidated into institutional structures, that means NGOs, by 1990. And now currently there is a big debate going on initiated by the young feminists of collective standard setting, that these NGOs, which are morally high because they work, as Dr. Rangiri Gautam told us, that they are working in a social sector, they are working against poverty, they are working for education, promotion of education, health, and the right-based approach. But at the same time, there is also a need to come up with the certain standards and code of conduct. Like NGOization clearly represents the growing domination of certain organizational form that is different from early consciousness raising organization, because consciousness raising, the tools which Paulo Freire and Ivan Illich used in the Latin American countries to conscientize the farmers against dictatorial regime, which was keeping them poor, which was at a gunpoint was making them cultivate narcotics, drugs instead of a fruits and vegetables and grain. So that kind of a initiation, which began in all social movements, all organizations of the oppressed masses. They may take form of a cooperative or trade union or voluntary organization or a grassroots movement. Now, the NGOs are different from the mass organizing in a sense that they have a legal standing, they have a legal locus standi. I remember when we were in the just umbrella organization like Forum Against Rape or any kind of a campaign organization, you operated from someone's house, you just come out with a leaflet, you come out with a statement, you organize demonstration rallies, but when the moment you talk of NGOization, you come under the ambit of the criminal justice system and also the legal structure of the country. So NGOization, the NGOization varies depending on what kind of resources they have, what level of operational, whether they are operating locally or at a state level, at a national level, like a Seva Bharat, or at a state level, we have Annapurna organizations like Annapurna, and also globally, we have so many global organizations like Oxfam, Novib, ActionAid, and even Seva has now become international, no? So this historical background of when the social movements of 70s and 80s started fragmenting and losing their mass base due to issue-based narrow struggles, formation of special interest groups and co-option of articulate urban English-knowing, professionally qualified activists and leaders of the people's movement, whether they were in the peasant movement, workers' movement, Dalit movement, youth movement, women's movement, tribal movement, into the power structures, when they were co-opted, NGOization process began.
Initially, they were called non-party political formations and voluntary organization. If you read the writings of Professor Rajni Kothari, Professor D.L. Seth, all the publications brought out by Lokayan in English and Hindi during 80s and 90s, they called them non-party political formations. In course of time, they developed into legalized entities as registered societies or a public trust or a non-profit or pro-profit trust supported by local resources or corporate or state government and the state state and also foreign funding institutions. There was an understanding that this kind of organizations, they have to very high, they began with a high level of motivation. They were non-corrupt, they were free from nepotism and red tapeism. If you read even the official reports of by Planning Commission in the say 8th, 9th and 10th plan, everything, the solution to all problems of the developing countries was found to be NGOs. If NGOs take, and always it was a Bangladesh example was given, that whole parallel governance of Bangladesh, and Bangladesh could achieve those high human development targets mainly because of the NGOs, right from 1971, when the whole state structure was completely collapsed. During 80s and 90s, NGOs were applauded by the UN bodies as rooted in the local reality. They were full of idealism, a quote-unquote bottom-up approach, which NGOs they adopted, and also participatory decision-making. So many liberal and socialist thinkers also declared them as third force of social transformation. NGOs were declared as a third force, that you have a state, you have a civil society, and you have this third force called NGOs. So first two being government bodies and also political parties. So what we see that now what we see, the new awareness among the funding institutions about misutilization of funding by government agencies was a result of intense debate of corruption, leakage and misappropriation of funding in the Asian, Latin American and African countries during 50s to 80s. So 30 years, there were so many studies on corruption and leakage. In fact, the famous sentence of late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, that if you target, if you allocate any fund for developmental agenda in Tamil Nadu, 15 paise out of 1 rupee, 85 paise would reach the people, targeted people, 15 would be eaten up. If you in rest of India, if you invest 1 rupee, 85% will be corruption, means it will be leakage, it will be eaten up on the way, and only 15 paise will reach the target group. So you can imagine the kind of, in the African countries, in Latin American countries, massive documentation on corruption and misappropriation by the government bodies and by the governance structures were reported. In the early 90s, there was a fear that global funding might get diverted to Eastern European countries that was culturally closer to Western world and had to face massive economic and political crisis due to collapse of Soviet Union. So this debate in the development studies circle brought massive change in the functioning of social movements in a post-colonial countries, which were subsidized by the outside funding. Initially, activists and experts from the minority communities and women were forced to accept foreign funding as they were marginalized in their own countries. Rest of the social movements diverted benefits of these fundings without any publicly acknowledging the source. Structural adjustment program and stabilization policies, which India adopted in 1991, resulted into a massive reduction in state funding, social sector funding. Even the mainstream institutions and organizations started adopting zero budget policy, and they started turning they were the victim of zero budget policy of the state, and they had to compete for fund from the foreign institutions, foreign funding agencies. New dialogue with the funders based on mutual respect has helped to get rid of anxiety that the developing world would be left out by the aid agencies. Induction of highly qualified professionals from developing countries as consultants to screen the proposals for funding is supposed to have reduced wastage and vested interest. NGOization impacts women employees and women in the movement, women's organizations. They are operating at a local level in terms of expansion of their organization, upscaling of their work, but at the same time, loss of autonomy, erosion of agenda setting power, and prioritization of accountability towards donor. These are some of the mind-boggling issues. Some national level women's organizations have been able to manage process through strategically mobilizing resources and prioritizing own agenda and retaining their feminist character. At a wider level, NGOization process has led to a blurring of boundaries between gender and development agenda and feminist discourses. The blurring of boundaries created by the opportunities for raising women's rights issues at different level, but led perhaps to a generational shift in how younger women engage with the gender equity issue. And currently we see that on several issues, whether it is a Me Too movement or whether it is what kind of hierarchy you have in the organization, and how do you look at the LGBTQIA movement, how do you transgender friendly you are in your NGO, all these issues have been debated the very heated debates are currently happening in the Feminist India Yahoo group. NGOization has impacted structure, agenda, autonomy, agency, and accountability of different types of women's and feminist organization. Adoption of service delivery model promoted by NGOs, concern over losing feminist political agenda has taken away steam from women's liberation movement, and influence of management institutions have changed the vocabulary of women's NGOs who talk in terms of SWOT analysis, success, weakness, opportunity, and threat analysis, or SCOT analysis, success, challenge, opportunity, and threat analysis, OD, organizational development, skill development, value for money, value addition, what is your USP, what marketable product you have, who are the beneficiary, who are the benefactors. So even the language of NGOs has completely changed over in last 20 years. Feminist solidarity and feminist ideology have taken a backseat, as in a neoliberal backdrop, each one is competing for patronage, travel grant, institutional funding, perpetually insecure about poaching of talented staff, or all NGO directors, they are complaining. So these people are poaching, they have taken away the best people from us. Even the women's studies centers know that the directors of women's studies center, they say, we invested in these young women for 15, 20 years and they have been poached and they have been taken away. So diversion of funding, that is also another complaint. The new slogans among the NGOs, like which are contact is capital. So be careful about the contact. Don't share your contact. So everyone has a complaint against me. Don't tell anything to Vibhuti. Otherwise, she will share with everyone, you know. And we come from the social movement, ethos are that share and care. Solidarity is very important. Network for power, concentration and centralization of resources have been the mantra of NGOization. In this culture, spontaneity, trust, solidarity, collective effort have been replaced by calculated move. What is your utility? The secrecy, individualism, atomized existence among women's groups. Only positive fallout of NGOization process is that feminist organizations like Jagori or like women's like Vacha or Sahir in Gujarat, they have been able to strengthen their institutional positions, means recognition by the mainstream bodies, consultancy firms, training centers, building, they have their own building, they have their staff, they have financial security, and they have created a wider reach through links they have developed through collaboration in the NGO projects. Moreover, women's organizations were forced to rethink their mobilization strategies and discourses as larger number of educationally qualified younger women and men engage with gender and development projects implemented by NGOs. So who is left for the voluntary work? That becomes a major challenge. The slogan of Me Too movement is more women in more powerful position. Okay, that has emerged over the last 5 years globally as well as in India. It applies to NGO sector also to enhance social security, social protection, safe working environment without sexual harassment or discrimination, sensitivity towards reproductive rights of women, whether it is a menstruation or pregnancy or maternity rights, agenda setting power that women should have. Women are not to be seen. Most of the NGO patriarchs, they just say that women are to be seen, they are not to be heard. Okay, so that kind of a culture which is existing in a male-dominated NGOs, that needs to be countered by creating more powerful position for women in the NGO sector. Women need to have a voice in decision-making process. And the slogan in 1975, which we all used to chant, "We don't make coffee, we make policy." I think that needs to be popularized now with a great gusto. More NGOs with women leadership are needed. NGOs need to implement labor standards, that means decent work, health insurance, maternity leave. Most of the NGO community-based workers and grassroots workers are working under extremely adverse circumstances. They are prone to illness, they are prone to accident, they are prone to many hazardous responses, either from the ecosystem or from the environment. So it is very important to provide them social protection. Their health insurance is very important. Violence-free workplace, cluster approach in recruitment. Don't send a woman alone. Just send them in a group, like my SNDT Women's University. Any work outside the campus, we would send a group of women so they can voice their concern, they can help each other in case of difficulty. And if we create this kind of ambience, then the NGOs will be opportunity driven, not distress driven. Opportunity driven, the talented women who are committed to society, social transformative change in the society, they would find the NGO position attractive. Otherwise, because you don't have a 55% cutoff, you can't get job in the academic world, or you can't get job in research institution, or there is less qualification, even corporate would not take you. Then you end up in NGO because out of the distress, okay, because you don't get that. Should not happen. So I think the whole debate on collective standard setting in NGO and humanizing the NGO structure, institutions, ecosystem, and the relations among different people with different kind of qualification, that is very, very important. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much for your excellent presentation. It was very precise, and you have touched almost all the dimensions of the thought of NGO itself. And thank you for making us understand about the process of NGOization and feminization in the sector. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I would like to invite Professor Vinita Singh Naik to kindly give her comment on the very issue. That is.
Thank you so much, Randhir. I will take over from Professor Vibhuti Patel. Ma'am, I feel so small and dwarfed in front of your macroscopic horizon that you have covered. But I'll still dare to open my mouth and put up my views in front of you. I would go for the topic. There are three words used. I would first like to stress on the three words. One is scope, the other is opportunity, and the third is women. I begin with the term women. My stand is that when you talk of women, it's such a huge, the term itself is so meaningful and meaning laden. We generally don't realize that when we use the term women, women themselves are categorized on the basis of economy, polity, caste, religion, age, education, occupation, and we cannot think of this huge group only on the sexual basis and make uniform statements or judgments. They themselves are categorized, and we really have to look into those categories. A simple thing like a 15-year-old and the vulnerabilities attached to a 15-year-old will definitely not be there with me. Or if I'm a married person, a divorcee, or a single woman, society's perspective or perceptions towards me as an individual changes. Or my occupational background or professional background makes all the difference, a huge difference in my life. Religion. One side we talk of Islam, with the other side Christianity, third side Hinduism. You look at the basic differences caused in women's lives, just because of the religious backgrounds. So my first thing I would like to verify or talk about is that women cannot be treated. Any group, anyone who is studying or researching into women, we generally tend to take them as one unit, which I feel will not be justifiable, because they themselves need to be looked into with all these details, or it needs more to looking into the categorization. The second term that we have used is opportunity in the NGO sector. Now, I being a college teacher, when I see some girls getting married in class 12, the others when they enter their graduation or otherwise later, I just question the parents that if you are not providing equal opportunity, which you talk about constitutionally, how are you going to justify her results or her pregnancy, or what the in-laws will take care of her academics? You say my responsibility is over by getting her married. So typical traditional guardian thinks that her responsibility is getting the daughter married. This mindset persists, God forbid, till date, as if she's a burden to be unloaded on some other family's back. And experiences in across have shown that in spite of all the talks, all the laws, when it comes to practical application, you never have the equal opportunity which a male child gets, whether it is family of procreation or whether it is family of marriage. And the basic reason is the domestic work regime, the roles, the gender roles. Gender roles are so distinguished in Indian society that we start discrimination unknowingly within the family circles. And it is here that I have to say that it does not, the opportunity does not filter down to the girls or to the women at the lower rungs, especially at the lower rungs, who are economically back or in the lower rungs. So opportunity is never the same. NGOs also realize this, that when we talk of opportunities, so same will apply for NGOs also, that all NGOs do not get equal opportunity also to flourish or go ahead or reach the state level or international branding level. They work with simple SHGs with small funds. Of course, the work there, I feel, is much more vibrant, though there is dearth of funds. But as ma'am said, the bonding, the Saheli, the term, or the woman-to-woman bonding, I feel, is much more genuine, much more pure than the huge NGOs where there is more of competition and more of insecurity, more of funding insecurity and other insecurities. And as ma'am said, that the feeling that they'll be poaching upon their people or trained personnel also. So opportunities are never the same. Same is the third term that has been used, the scope. Scope also, it depends. We have small entrepreneurs, very small timers who take loans and begin. And really, as ma'am said, this COVID situation back home, when all the migrants returned to rural India, and when they were out, as you know, from the metros and the urban centers to the rural centers, they started working with Manrega, and Manrega could not fulfill that many mandates or provide jobs for that many people. So when they started the cultivation, the horticulture, the vegetable cultivation, I'm talking of Jharkhand, we have huge opportunities there when it came to cultivation. They started planting fruit orchards, and then they came in plantations of such fruits which had good market selling, of which would be sold at a better price. So these things we are noticing post-COVID, that those who are coming back, the migrant workers, They are getting help from government as well as from NGOs. But the basic thing is that the scope of small entrepreneurship is growing. And I can vouch, I'm no pro or anti-government, not a politics person from politics, but I have to mention that when Prime Minister Modi was talking of this Atmanirbhar Bharat, he was laughed at and 10 mockeries made at, but he who wears the crown knows how heavy the crown is and the thorns that are in it. You put yourself in any person's shoes, you'll realize that as individuals, with the kind of population and the diversity of population that India has, it's a huge mammoth task. Forget about the nation head or country head or state head. No one individual can hold that crown which is full of thorns. So this Atmanirbhar Bharat was a good initiative in the sense that these people who had flown, mass migration, now there is a reverse migration, and you're seeing people, those who went back after the first wave, again they were pushed back with the coming of the second wave. So now they are gradually trying to settle in rural life. And I think rural India is I can talk on data. We don't think in sociology also, we need data to prove our facts. So we can collect enough data to prove that those people who have returned after coming back, they are settling in, and especially in Jharkhand, the floriculture, the horticulture, and the cultivation. Now it is the season of cultivation also. Like things are moving now. Life is moving. That's one good thing. And now another thing I would like to say, how this process has moved. This NGOs, how did they move? Initially, it began with some people doing charity work. Then it went to development, as ma'am said. Then it came down to sustainable development. Then the empowerment process. And then now, after the empowerment process, things get stuck where the funding sources come from. Now, this funding also, as ma'am has already put it very blatantly, all kinds of funding are coming in, and with international funding growing, there is also a fear that ideologically, are they going to make us slaves, or do we have to take in everything they talk about, or accept everything even at the ideological plane or their culture, as ma'am knows, and we all know that what globalization has fruits, but it has also given many negative things have also come with globalization. So now what is important as a student of sociology is the role of the family, and how much of role models do we have? How many small-time entrepreneurs or people like Ela Bhatt who have become international figures? So how many role models are there for us to cite in real life? Then how much of passion we have? As I was just conversing before this with Vibhuti ma'am, when I said when I was working with the domestic workers, the book was published, I got my degree, but that doesn't give you that soul satisfaction. There is some vacuum, I feel, because until and unless you are not able to make a difference in the lives of people, ultimately you feel hollow from within, that all you did is got a piece of paper as a degree, as a researcher, did some academic work on it and sat down. Your real joy comes from activism. Hats off to people who are fighting for these rights of the downtrodden. I really feel that if there is some way out, I can be out of this profession, which I'm not very comfortable with anymore because of the semester system where we are only taking exams, giving marks, and then evaluating copies. And then I feel that this is not the profession in which I want to be. I want to be fighting for the rights of those domestic workers for whom I can feel their pain. I want to make a difference in the lives of those people. So I think NGOs are the right people, activists are the right people who can voice their opinion, talk from right platforms and make a difference in the lives of those people. For us, they become objects of study. But for them, they are not objects, they are not subjects. They are live human beings whose lives are being transformed and taken care of by NGOs. So from this platform itself, I would like to salute to all those people who are making difference in the lives of other people. And then the devotion and the education that you have, the passion that you have from within for a particular cause, that is what that keeps an NGO running or going. Now, another aspect which has disturbed me more than rather COVID, I have spent personally sleepless nights post being human, that's the NGO, post Bollywood, post the charitable trusts. I learned a new term called Illuminati. I kept Googling what is Illuminati, and that has set me thinking after Sushant Singh Rajput's murder, I will call it. I have been sleepless that are these NGOs really ethical? Are they really carrying on good social work? Or is it something they are doing in prostitution, in child trafficking, in the drug nexus? What is it? It has set my mind thinking, and I'm really, really worried as an individual. I won't even say being a teacher or a person in academics. As a citizen of the country, the dirt that is being unearthed, the media, is it really sold? Is the press sold? Or is the press divided? Or wrong things are coming out in print and other media, social media? This has really set me thinking. Now, another thing I would like to add is people are realizing, I mean, the whole country is realizing, and that is why even in the education policy, the new education policy has come up. They are talking of skill development, and they want people to be, along with pen, paper, and academic thinking and strategy building and consultancy, we come down to on-job work. On-job training is being given more and more of importance. Today also in the first half, I was rather trying to learn about some things about White Hat Junior and what is cyber hacking and how cyber hacking takes place. What is cloning? I was trying to learn the terminologies through a class, a session for the IT students. I joined the students class because the IT and the BBS students, they use these terms and the children are friendly. But I, being non-technical person, not friendly at all with internet facilities and things like that. So I try equipping myself and learning. As far as the scope of NGOs is women are concerned, it ranges. It depends on your personal ability to the ability to formulate and how much of solidarity you can create. It all depends on that. And the selflessness. Do you have any vested interest? Is it power? Is it money? Or is it really coming from the passion? So what is the direction in which you are taking your NGO or work? This needs to be examined. Ma'am has put in a very macroscopic picture, befitting an economist. I'm talking from a very microscopic view and my personal experiences as a simple teacher in a simple college. That's all I would like to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Beneath Dr. Vibhuti Patel, madam, would you like to say something? You are muted.
Yeah,
yes.
I think Dr. Vinita Singh has really complemented and provided far more grounded understanding of the situation, and especially some of the major challenges which are faced currently within the during the period of lockdown, and the kind of anxieties and lot of heartbreaking news that we have been getting, and the way she ended, that how we need to really seriously reflect on what is happening in the name of NGO. There are NGOs and NGOs and NGOs, which are the good ones, which are the trustworthy, and we need, that is why the issue of setting the standard becomes very important. What should be the code of conduct? What should be the standard? Because it's a totally unregulated sphere. And that is why so many irregularities and might is right kind of a culture that has propped in NGOs. And I think that needs to be taken care of. And we as a civil society organizations and democratic participatory process becomes very important in this. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Vinita Singh ma'am, for giving a very different perspective in order to understand the process of NGOization, with different connotation. So I request respected participants to kindly ask any questions or comment in the chat box itself, because Vibhuti Patel madam has to leave very soon, so she can respond in chat box itself. हमारे साथ एक और भी हमारी शख्सियत जो जुड़ी हैं, डॉक्टर रुचि गोस्वामी जी, और अभी हमारी डॉक्टर विनीता सिंह मैडम ने कहा, we need more activists in social transformation. So she is also nurturing a very small organization, but very creative organization called Diwali, a social welfare unit. So now I would like to invite Dr. Ruchi Goswami to kindly share her view. आप हिंदी में भी बोल सकती हैं मैम।
नमस्कार आप सभी को। सर मेरी आवाज आप तक आप रही है सर? बिल्कुल बिल्कुल आ रही है। First of all, it's indeed a great honor to be with these big personalities, sir. I feel myself so small to just speak anything before these people. Vibhuti ma'am, Vinita ma'am, I actually do not know what to speak, but yes, thank you Randeep sir. A small effort in the field of social welfare. The name of my, I would not call it an NGO, it is a small social club. It is Dhwani. Dhwani is voice of all. Anybody can raise voice. किसी को कुछ कहना है तो वो कह सकते हैं, problems share कर सकते हैं. Chanda ma'am, I would just thank Chanda ma'am and my deep respect to Chanda ma'am. She is advisor of this social club. और उनकी guidance में हम लोग बहुत सारी activities करते हैं. Not much we have done till now, lot to be done. विभूति मैम ने जितनी बात की, विनीता मैम आपने बात की कि we need good NGOs and we need good activists, I think. तो आप लोगों से सुनकर ऐसा लगता है कि a lot can be done, a lot can be planned for these people, a lot can be planned for these deprived ones, for these people who need us, the people who need women. For a small, I would like to say a small, prepared a small PPT. I'd like to share a small journey and my points in the field of social welfare, what can be done and what we are actually doing. And I need your support, your guidance, or what better we can do. Ma'am, please, Vibhuti ma'am, Vinita ma'am, please, you can better guide us. I'll share my PPT. Yes, ma'am. Randi sir, is it visible to you all?
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. With all your permissions, I would like to just say something about it. I do not know the definition of an NGO, ma'am. I do not know the definition. I just define it my own way. मैं ऐसा कह सकती हूँ, ma'am. It is a helping hand. It is a helping hand, and anybody can help anybody. अगर मुझे अपनी सोसाइटी में कुछ लग रहा है कि मुझे इसकी हेल्प करनी है, तो मुझे लगता है एनजीओ का पर्पस वहीं सर्व हो रहा है. चाहे वो एक 15 years की बच्ची हो, चाहे वो 80 years की women हो. And this is a picture wherein the schoolyards, small school student, student of 15, 16 years is helping these small children and telling them the importance of ideally giving them food packets and telling them to give the importance of education also. What I believe, I think the young minds and the young children, the schoolyards, the collegiates, as I am a media faculty in a college in Jaipur, Rajasthan, Women's Studies Center, we also run a Women's Studies Center, or I got good guidance from Chanda ma'am, or it was my initiative when I got a chance to be entered into that cell, or Chanda ma'am just told a lot we could do that time, but my small ideas, what can be done through these, we can be the helping hands for these children. Let the young India help us. These young children, the school years, the college years, they can help us in this regard. Instilling value of education, a big problem. These children, they want to study, but telling them the value of education in a small scale, making them independent, making them empowered. We can just tell them what is important for them, what is to be done in that regard, and what can better empower their lives. This is a picture when we just had a food drive, ma'am. We just, not a big research, but we tried to just drag a small part of Sodala area, Jaipur, and we just dragged out some families. Jahan par, ma'am, because of Corona, post-COVID, some of these women just lost their husbands, and some of these women lost their young boys and young girls who were a source of economy, source of money, source of. We just tried to drag out these 80 families, and we just tried to provide them with the food packets and also talk to them that what better, what can they do. And what I concern, women can do better for the women. We as a women, as academicians, as educationists, I think we can just do better. We understand their psychology. These are these maybe the concerns, psychological concerns, social concerns from our side, emotional connect. We can just help them living better lives. Understanding the community, women power is ultimate. That in a total way, in totality, the women can do wonders, I think. And also the economic concerns. Viewing all these indicators, we 40 members of the small social club try to help these women in giving them food packets. Also asking them what they can do and how we can help them empowering themselves. These are the major, as Vinita ma'am and Vibhuti ma'am just told us in a right way, in an exhaustive way, what are the basic issues that the women in India or the deprived ones are just facing nowadays. And in the last so many decades also, the same problems are existing till date. Illiteracy, lack of proper education, sexual harassment at workplace, education, health, security, these, and NGO at the same time plays the NGOs, the micro NGOs, the macro NGOs can play a vital role in combating all these issues. A promise we as a women, we as academicians, we as a part of the social society, this community. What I think we can think today. We can think today what we can do now. What we can do at the same time for these people, for the society. And the moment we are just living today is precious. As I got insight from you people that what can better, what the NGOs can do in a better way. But this is the crucial moment, ma'am. This is the moment where we can think of just taking steps in helping anybody. We can see the environment where we are living. Suppose we are living in the area, in a small area, we need to observe our environment, the geographical area we are living. We need to observe the surroundings, find the issues around, maybe the illiteracy issue, maybe the health issues, maybe the post-COVID issues, maybe the innumerable issues. Research becomes an important, as we belong to the sociology thing. I am the media faculty, and you people are just working since years in this regard. The research we can do in this regard. What kind of stakeholder, what kind of women we can cater, what kind of group we can help, and we can talk to these individually. We can talk to these in groups. But sympathy word, I do not understand, ma'am. Sympathy word. I want these to be empowered. I need these women to be empowered on various grounds, and we can help them for empowering. The definition of needy, I think this is not an easy task to just speak out. We can empower these. This is a picture of old man. हमने इनको मैम हमने इनको मनी कलेक्ट करके इनको ये रिक्शा हमने सेकेंड हैंड रिक्शा इनको दिया था, and this man is just is now he is earning something out of this. So just a small trial, a small effort in the field, how we can just help these small people who need our help. He did not take money. He just denied to take money, but we the women, we 40, 50, 60 women collected money, and we just helped him, helping with rickshaw and the food packet also. Dhwani is my social club, ma'am. We are just trying to touch upon these areas: education, health, security, empowerment, disaster, social justice. Also, women, we have had some police officer from Jaipur, DYSP, Sunita Meena ji. She is working, she is just running a big campaign, Nirbhaya campaign. Also, the young guys from our group and in my college also help her to help her in this Nirbhaya squad. And also
it is a panel discussion
okay, ma'am. Okay. Equality, equity, it is needed. It is need of the hour. Then all these issues are being dealt by the eminent speakers as well in the better food. We can just help these women or any group of the society to have better food, to have better resources, better health, better education, better lives. Or we also just try to help the women, female from 2 areas in Jaipur, and help them to just earn something, earn and learn. So we just tried to research what kind of work they can do, and out of that research, we found that out of all, they can be engaged in stitching, paper bags, masks, cloth bags, and papad, badi achar, and jute work also. A small trial. Happy Independence Day. Tomorrow is a big day. Or we can take a pledge on the 75th Independence Day. We can promise ourselves to help 1 child in a month the way we want. We can promise to help 1 woman around in any manner. We can promise to give food to 1 family in a month. Promise to our nation to be a help, change our society. Also, government schemes we know. This is all, ma'am, a small effort and my ideas about it. Now, I just request Vibhuti ma'am, Vinda ma'am to help us, and their ideas also will just work out those ideas which can help me and my NGO and my social club in just working out and helping these women in that community groups. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, रुचिका जी. बहुत ही अच्छा है और आपका जो प्रयास है वो काबिलिए तारीफ है और डेफिनेटली हम लोग भी आपके साथ जुड़ेंगे. मिस चंदा मैम, आप हैं? यस, नमस्कार. मैं आप ही को इनवाइट करने वाला था. तो आपका स्वागत है. आई नो थोड़ा सा आपका नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लम है, बट आप ऑडियो के साथ भी Yes, namaskar. Yes, it's visible.
Namaskar. Thank you so much, Dr. Gautam, Dr. Randhir Gautam. I have recently, like last 1 year ago, I joined Teachers Training College, which is eminent. It's in a rural area, and Teachers Training Girls College. And but my training was from a rural outreach program of SNDT Women's University, where I learned of what is political and what is apolitical. And so now, since we are talking about NGOs, women and scope, so in India, even if 1% women are part of NGO, that 1% of women in India is a very huge number. So when we talk about that NGOs, so NGOs by Professor Vibhuti Patel said that the genesis of NGO. So before the genesis of NGO, we have to get at the genesis of nations when the empire broke up. So we have late 40s empire breaking up and nations founding. So all over the world. So, and in 20 years, like 70s, when the people's movement start, NGOs sprung up. So we need to understand the connection that what is this? And when we say, and Professor Vinita Singh said, I am just talking about individual, that is the most powerful statement of an individual stating what she feels. And Professor Goswami, Ruchi Goswami, she is making another statement by coming out of her boundaries to reach out not only herself, she is also helping other women to get together to make a difference in the society. So when all these things like different spheres people are wanting to help, we need to know what is political and what is apolitical. So an outreach program of a university, of SNDT Women's University, which Professor Vibhuti Patel was part of initiating it. She was there right when it started in 1974, where Center for Women's Studies started in SNDT Women's University. Center for Women's Studies is a political, the department is a political department. And I joined that place in 1996. So it's like, and then I asked myself, where was I then? Where was I in 70s? I don't know where I was. So there is a whole lot of people who are not even aware of what's happening. So what is covered in media and what understanding we get, unless we connect all these issues of making of nations and making of NGOs. So why the questioning is, when questioning human beings are co-opted. So initially nations are formed when people question in this empire that what are they doing under control of this one entity, one empire entity. And why do we want to break out of it and form nations? And when the nations were formed in 20-25 years time, in late 70s, people's movement started and women were definitely very much part of it. So when women also, then a whole lot of money was dumped and the NGOs sprung up. So that means the questioning of women and men, not just women. So questioning of women and men, all are co-opted. So after what the session one by one, it is like a journey of the whole political journey. starting from what Professor Vibhuti Patel started, how genesis of NGOs, and then Professor Dr. Vinita Singh is sharing her individual journey of individual thinking and thoughts, where she kind of shares her feelings. So to be able to share one's feeling about this collective space is a very political statement. So women's studies says personal is political. So when if we are not able to connect all these, and then Dr. Ruchi Goswami, she keeps mentioning, I am doing something very little. So why should women think that they are doing something little, which we should doing a great work? But women are kind of told to think of their work as small, making them invisible. So it is really my pleasure to be part of this whole session. And I was able to listen to everything. That's why I keep the video off, so that at least I'm able to listen and see. So I really thank you so much for insisting.
Thank you.
And I thank Dr.
Thank you, Chanda ma'am. And you are a very inspiring soul. And I met so many of your creative students who are doing a lot of great work in Rajasthan. And also, you know, the source of inspiration from Vibhuti Patel ma'am.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of, it's like recently she shared a photo, and I want you all to see that. It is I am technologically very challenged. She shared, she's cutting stencils for the rape which happened from the beginning. It was the beginning of women's movement. And
1979.
Yes. And she has 2 plants, and she's so beautiful. Like,
oh my God.
She still is. And I have heard her sing also. Ruchi, you to know that Professor Patel sings very beautifully. And when she had come once to Udwada, I was so I don't know whether she remembers that. I was so mesmerized by her singing. And there's a Gujarati song, something like that. Yeah. So it is. So this NGOs are not accountable per se, by nature. They are apolitical, accountable to the people they are working for. They are accountable only to the funders. So Professor Patel has brought out all the drawbacks of it very well. I don't need to repeat them. So, but if some NGOs are doing good work, it is only because the individual, as Dr. Vinita Singh says, the individuals are concerned about people. So then only they can make a difference. Those NGOs where people are concerned, they make a difference. So I think I take leave now. Thank you so much
thank you so much.
Being here.
Thank you so much. I think I have one more. Indu, ma'am, have you joined? I think she is taking some time. So now I would like to invite respected participant to ask any questions to respective. I can see Dr. Arvinder Ansari ma'am has also joined. I think Indu Sahu ma'am has joined. So I think she is facing network issue, but let me check. Indu Sahu ma'am, are you there? Indu Sahu madam, are you there? Kindly unmute yourself. Any participants who are interested to ask any question, you can ask, because Indu madam, yes. Darshani, yes. Please, ma'am.
Good evening,
Yes.
sir.
Good evening.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Yes, yes, good evening. You are audible.
Sir, in this COVID pandemic time, is NGO sector is helping India, sir?
Yes. You have to unmute yourself. Darshani, you have to unmute yourself. Yes, please ask your question.
In this COVID-19 pandemic situation, the NGO sectors are helping India. That's my question, sir. How they help India in this COVID-19 pandemic? Many people suffer, especially women.
Yes, Vibhuti Patel, ma'am, one of our respected participant is asking how NGO sector is helping in pandemic time. Yes,
NGOs have done. On 16th of March, when the lockdown was declared, first thing NGOs did was starting the first 15 days were full of police atrocities, and lot of people did not know what were the rules of the lockdown and all that. So holding hand of the people, approaching Human Rights Commission, and by April, and most of the migrant workers, 60% of the migrant workers in the cities and the rural poor, they were facing tremendous hunger, massive sale of ornaments, household items started happening. They were completely resource-rich, and the NGOs were the first one to start the community kitchens. In Bombay, community kitchens started in the last week of March only. My daughter has been doing that right from 16th of March till now. And the community kitchens, distribution of ration kit. Most of the NGOs which were earlier doing organizing talk and doing awareness generation program, all of them completely 100%, they diverted the resources for food security. By May and when the reverse migration started, NGOs were waiting. They started walking with the migrants for 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer, 20 kilometers, helping their children to carry their children, giving them distillery water, giving them footwear. In fact, they received call from various shoemaking companies, like Bata and all. They said they are ready to donate slippers and all. So they did that. They contacted home guards, they contacted local self-government bodies, municipal corporation in the cities, and they started arranging water and gas cylinder for the community kitchens, which were cooking food for 2,000 people, 6,000 people. In Bhiwandi, places like Bhiwandi, 12,000 packets per meal were being made. So that happened. Another thing that private practitioners started charging bomb. So NGOs organized the doctors like Janaswasthya Sabha, People's Health Assembly, Medico Friends Circle, then organizations like the Doctors Without Border. The volunteer doctors, they started making health camp, because you know that even to move under the lockdown, even to move from one place to other place, you needed so many certificates. Even the migrant workers who wanted to go back, and the Shramik Express had started, they needed 18 types of papers. So helping them with the paperwork, everything was happening digitally. So contacting district commissioner, contacting local municipal corporator, contacting officers, all that they did, and also help them get the medical certificate. In city like Mumbai, just to get 3 lines written, okay, you are eligible, you don't have COVID, you are eligible to travel back. Doctors in private practitioners were charging between 2,500 to 4,000 people, where people did not even have money for a second square meal. Another thing, that in a COVID center and the camp, where there were no separate facilities for women, especially for toilets and all. And there were reported cases of sexual harassment. NGOs immediately took stand, and they saw that separate wing in the COVID center and containment zone for women were created. Sanitary pads were not declared as essential item, and it was in the context of massive water shortage in the urban slums, because it was the month of March, April, May. There is a tremendous water shortage otherwise also, and the COVID directive also demanded you have to wash your hands again and again. So they saw to it that they contacted the municipal commissioners, and even later on, the nationally also Ministry of Women and Child Development was contacted that please see to it that sanitary pads are distributed freely, and later on Government of India started distributing free this thing, and that distribution was also done by the NGOs. For example, 1 lakh sanitary pads were dumped in TISS with one social worker, and she contacted all the NGOs for the distribution of sanitary pads. Another thing was that special needs of the people with the comorbidities who did not, with corona, they also had diabetes, tuberculosis, cancer, neonatal, newly born babies, because reproductive health, all the maternity wards were converted into corona ward. So women in pain, women who were in labor, women who were in pain, women who delivered babies at home or in the street, and they were also supported by the NGOs. Most important thing is NGOs did, along with relief workers, that they were documenting whatever human miseries were happening. They were writing in Facebook or social media. They were taking pictures. Those who could not read and write, I remember our Jamila B, she could not write, but she was at least taking the videography and uploading it on the Facebook. And so people came to know. But if you don't know what is happening at a ground level, you can't even find solution. So the most important role of NGOs was social solidarity at 5 levels: food security, reproductive health concerns, immediate health issues which they needed, plus helping them with various certification that was required, and for a mass cooking, for a community kitchens and all, getting the facilities like Ujjwala scheme is there, but how do people access it? So NGOs became a bridge between government and this to get the gas cylinder or a water tank for camp, or contacting corporate world, Fortune 500 companies to give from their CSR funds to get 2,000 beds or 12,000 those jumbo COVID centers. How were the whole facilitation was done by the NGOs. So they became civil society organizations, community-based organizations, and NGOs. They did not have coronaphobia, where most of the officers and politicians were organizing their meeting on Zoom, online meeting. They were actually going to the community, and even in the Dharavi could be controlled. Dharavi controlled COVID within 1 month. In the month of March, there was a massive beating by police, and by April, NGOs working in Mumbai, they established rapport, they talked to them, they explained to them why it is important to follow the COVID norms and organize mass camp for detection camp and this thing. And now everyone is emulating, whole world is talking about Bombay model, which was a decentralized model. And this decentralization of decentralized manner of combating corona could emerge only because Bombay Municipal Corporation had a very cordial relation with the community-based organizations and NGOs. So it is very important. The communication between GOs and NGOs is very important, and that way Bombay gave a very good example. Because after this thing that Lathi Goli Bedi jail is not a solution. Solution is democratic discussion and discourse with the community, establishing trust. There was a tremendous trust deficit in the March 2020, and NGOs acted as an agency to establish trust in the system. So people cooperate.
Yes. Thank you so much. I can see one raised hands. Najia Alfat Ahmed, would you like to ask? You have to unmute yourself. Najia Alfat Ahmed, please ask your question. Yes, Najia Alfat Ahmed, please ask your question. Okay, he's taking some time. I can see one question on the Facebook. One participant is asking how NGO can face challenges by the state, like anti-democratic and authoritarian measures.
Yeah. So I think most important thing is solidarity. Very important that if you are isolated, then it is very easy to cow you down. But once you have a solidarity, others stand up. For example, when question of violation of democratic rights in rural and urban area happened, it was NHRC was approached. So many public interest litigations were filed in the high courts and Supreme Courts by NGOs, demanding some proper regulation, proper democratic way of functioning, sticking to the International Covenant of Human Rights, UDHR and all. That demand was made by NGO. In response to that, National Human Rights Commission appointed 21-member committee from various civil society organizations, those who are working on housing rights, those who are working on water rights, those who are working on health rights, health as a right, food security. They were inducted by NHRC and they were asked that you give us the document, what is happening at a ground level because of the fear, psychosis, and everyone was full of fear. Even policemen were full of fear. So many policemen have lost their lives. So many teachers have lost their, most of the school teachers had to do the distribution of ration. That was the part of their duty. And we know that in one state alone, there were more than 3,000 teachers have died. In Bombay also, hundreds of pro-policemen. So out of fear, psychosis, the kind of undemocratic behavior was happening. So that countering that could happen because of the efforts of NGO and also the press, reaching out to the press, giving every day they were giving press releases. They were calling meeting, constantly they were calling meeting with the elected representatives, with the ward officers, with the central government, ministry. So all the social media portals they were using, and wherever it was possible, face-to-face meetings were not possible, but wherever it was possible, they were also organizing meeting, observing the COVID norms. So that was a very important way of dealing, democratizing it and using social media very sensitively and projecting. I remember the volunteers, they would not sleep before writing their field diary. The way we researchers do, we were told never to sleep without whatever has happened during the day, everything they were writing on Facebook and putting up pictures and videos on Instagram and Twitter. And they were also creating blogs where people could write their responses of what is happening in their area, sharing and carrying of information and resources that was happening. I saw that various NGOs, like if the person was 40 kilometers away and there is another NGO, they would ring up each other and they say that, okay, this person needs milk, or this person is a small baby who is hungry and we need to reach out, or this person is a diabetic and they need a special food. So this kind of a collaboration which they did, and they did also with the government officers, that was also done. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I can see one more raised hand. Avilasa Pathak. Yes, you have to unmute yourself. Please ask the question. Yes, please.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah.
So my question to the panelists is that there are many frontline healthcare workers that are working under the program ICDS. There are many ASHAs and Anganwadi workers, and also there are other Sahayikas also. They are recruited by the government and they are provided the work in the rural areas only. But I've seen in the recent times that last year, when there was a COVID situation, the frontline workers were working very hard in the field, and they were going door-to-door surveys they were doing. And, they were working very strenuously and putting all their efforts to collect the data of those who were affected by COVID. Even this year also, they have done major surveys in the villages to, chalk out who are the orphans who have been, severely affected by the COVID and they have lost their parents. But the major issue that they are facing, that I have also interviewed some of them, was that they were not being provided the exact honorarium that they should be given. So what efforts can be done from our side and also from the government to increase their payments, and so that the thing that they are doing, the work they are doing is very hard, and some of them even have been affected by COVID, and some of them have been fever or have been very severely affected. So what can be done?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And I would like to ask this question to Vinita Singh ma'am, because her work is domestic worker is very significant. So please, Vinita ma'am.
I would like to state a fact to you. We cannot go in for categorization here, because it's not only ICDS workers alone who are having this economic problem. The entire nation, thousands have lost lives, thousands are struggling for a living. Many people in the corporate sector have been downsized. My own child is a highly qualified orthopedic surgeon, and no corporate hospital was willing to take an extra surgeon. They said we cannot pay to the surgeons who already exist. So highly qualified people also lost their jobs, were sitting down at home. That's why I said Atmanirbhar Bharat. So when you look at something beta macroscopically, if you take a macroscopic view, yes, my sympathies, I empathize with your empathy for the workers who are frontline workers, who are working there. They should get more honorarium. But you have to look at the general scene. There's utter chaos. Not only them, even the doctors were suffering. The nurses in the COVID wards have also lost life. The ward boys have lost life. The ambulance drivers have lost lives. And there is no looking back at the trauma that people have suffered. Everybody, every sector of society. So here I feel personally is that you cannot take ICDS workers alone as the lone sufferers post-COVID. Regarding remuneration, well, as an individual or as an NGO, you can write to the authorities to increase their salary, which is near to impossible. My state is running with contractual teachers from the last 3 years. I'm the lone faculty in the department from the last 29 years. The intake is because of the gross enrollment ratio, the intake of students is going on increasing. We are running in 2 shifts, and digitalization has solved the problem. You can have a Google Meet or a Teachment app, which takes in 1,000 students. You go in for Telegram and teach 1,000 students. You're not required. Even a technical person can do it, can do the work of a teacher. So things are changing very fast. So yes, we can sympathize, we can have empathy, but ICDS workers are not the only ones who have been suffering. It's entire society, every walk of life, you see people suffering all around. That's what I have to say. So,
thank you, very perfect.
From a macroscopic view.
Yes, thank you. And very sociological view also, to think beyond the immediate context.
No, but also there is an argument that pandemic profiteer, currently G20 countries, they agreed that they will charge 15% extra corporate tax because those who have made a massive profit, billions of dollars who have made, no? So it is not only a question of resources, but Anganwadi workers and ASHA workers, they have to be paid. They are government employees. At least give them state minimum wage. What they are asking for, the minimum wage which any worker, every state gives, that much they should be given. You can't call them volunteer. They are the worker, they are the employee. And the right of social security and social protection that they need, they don't even are given mask or gloves. They are working, they are the one who are the most exposed to the COVID virus, no? But still they don't even have the preliminary equipments, the personal protection equipment that they are not given. It is a question of political will. I don't think it's a question of resources. It is, because they are not asking for a bomb, or they are not asking for, they are asking state minimum wages and to be considered as worker and health insurance, which is, I think, very justifiable for the kind of work.
Thank you, ma'am. One of our, I request respected participant to kindly be with us for 10 minutes, because one of our respected speaker has just joined. So Indu Sahu, ma'am, would you like to, you have to complete within 5 minutes. So you can share your experience being a woman working in NGO sector, particularly in tribal area, Chhattisgarh. Hindu Song, madam, please.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Randhir. I'm sorry I was not able to, join you on time as I was traveling. So, as informed, the topic was scope and opportunity for women in NGO sector. So, what I would like to say is like I have been in this sector since last 16, 17 years. In fact, I worked with an NGO also for a couple of years. So you can say around 20 years. The scope is definitely there to work, but the challenges are there as in other sectors also. Same is with the NGO sector also. The reason is variably, the reasons are different in different regions and different class of a society. At places like in small places, you don't have the proper resource persons which you need to, run the organization, or they don't have the proper qualification which, they need to run an organization. So there we lack leadership in certain areas. I meet a lot of women who want to do some or the other social work, but they don't know what to do. So these are few challenges. And, if you want to be in a development sector, if you want to run an organization or a non-government organization, or you want to be in social sector, there is no time limit. You have to be on your toes all the time. So this again is a barrier for a lot of women, because there is time barrier for a lot of them. A lot of girls, they can't go out as soon as it's dark. Like after 6 o'clock, they won't be able to travel or go to a place where the help is required. So those are the barriers which we need to cross over. Then only we can increase especially the leadership. We do have people who are working in organizations, but we still lack in the leadership of organizations. We do have a lot of INGOs also, where where a lot of women work, but when you look into the leadership thing, you will find very few women in lead roles. So that is again a challenge, and this is not a challenge just of NGO sector. This is a challenge in all the sectors. So what I think and I would recommend is like we need to put social sector or development sector as a priority during our career counseling also, because people have been opting for various subjects, but still this is the last option. Social being in development sector is last option, especially smaller areas or backward areas. And they don't have good institutions also. When we talk about good institutions which are conducting these degrees, MSW and all. And moreover, I have seen that in graduation, like BSW is not pursued by a lot of children. They just do their graduation and someone tells them that ki isme kuch acha opportunity ho sakta hai, then they will go for MSW. But I have seen very less students or people coming in to our organization who have applied, that they have consistently been doing courses on these kind of things and being a specialist in a particular field. Mostly I have seen that the graduation is in some other subject and the master's degrees in social work. So what we need to do is like we definitely need more people in this sector and good and trained people in this sector. Even in the skill industry, we have been seeing that these subjects are being taken up and children are being trained in this sector. So definitely there is a lot of scope for women in this NGO sector. All we need is to promote it. And since Randhir, you are associated with a university, I would like to request that I don't know the situation in Rajasthan, but you should definitely ask children to go for such specialized course, so that we have people experts like this in other states also, and definitely they will get a chance to lead the various INGOs or local NGOs also who are working in different areas and different issues. We really lack children or people who are expertise in dealing with a particular issue. If you speak that if you want to have a resource person who is skilled in finding out the women issues or children issues, you will find very less people, at least in my state. So we need to have specialized people, and definitely they'll find their place in this sector. Thank you.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we are running out of the time. Now I would like to invite Miniti Pradhan for reciting a poem. Yes, and then we'll have a formal vote.
Can I just ask one question to the panelists?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. It was nice to listening to all the deliberations. But my question is to all the panelists. So what is the importance of a counselor in a NGO? I mean, many NGOs, small NGOs and all, we find there is no counselor, I mean, professional counselor also. And I feel it is very much necessary. So what would they say about this? What is? Then
May I answer your question? May I answer your question, ma'am? Yeah. See, a counselor is a very, very important person in an organization, and especially if the organization is working on particular issue, like if they are working on women issues or especially the children issue, you need to have a counselor, because those are the people who can, at times help the children or the women or anyone who is suffering from anything to, take out the problems which they are going through. So all organizations, it should be mandatory to have a counselor, and we do have counselors in all our projects which we are running. Be it a skill program, be it a health program, be it a program based on child health or women issues. A counselor is a must for an organization to deal with the people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes.
So,
Miniti Pradhan, would you like to share one poem?
I'll just recite one poem. I mean, do I have time to recite 2 poems? Because both are actually, I feel, very close to my heart on women issues.
Yes, please.
So actually, in many of my essays and stories and the poetries, I use women issue as a subject. So this one I have written on Devadasis. Devadasis who actually that from the childhood they get married. So that the title of the poem is Sacred Thread. Full of dreams were in my sparkling eyes at the tender age of just 5. A marriage ceremony, loads of gifts, a few new clothes, and hundreds of guests, and a big feast. Unknown to me, pushed me into the future of utter darkness. As time moved, Slowly, I understood the real meaning of my innocent happiness. Feeling the pain of being married to a god, living a shattered life of a helplessness of a Bardasi. In the sacred flesh trade, the royalty and upper caste abused my body and mind as their God-given birthright. I turned into property of every pivot. My so-called lower caste did not matter to them. What and why did my people fear? A curse from God to live the life in hell worse than the 1,000 curses? Ostracized by life of HIV, disease and poverty, living in identity crisis. Me and my offspring, I was cheated into hell in the lore of heaven. I was cheated into hell in the lore of heaven. Stop this exploitation. And in the false name of caste and religion and tradition. Let your narrow selfishness dissolve in the conscience of divinity. Be alive and wake up to the call of humanity. Thank you. And one more poem. I will just in recent Women's Day I have written. It is about all the women, how every woman possesses all these. I mean how they are a superwoman. So this is. I am a woman, a superwoman. I am Sita. Digging into the depth of my heart, what did you find? Fire or gold? The lowering flame that will crack open the earth. I am a woman, a superwoman. I am Ahalya. Did you think I was dumb? A mere stone? True, I have been silent for ages. My wait for freedom, I'm not mere a symbol of patience. I am a woman, a superwoman. I am Draupadi. How loud did you laugh that day at the cruelty of my undressing? Out of naked helplessness came the determination to eradicate the lineage. Every dog in the palace. I am a woman, a superwoman. I am Surpanakha. I am not afraid of being disfigured. Slashing of my nose and ears of my desire. I am not greedy as you are for money and lost in the shadow of lust. I am a woman, a superwoman. I am Kali. Blazing fires in my eyes, I will burn. I will annihilate the demons, the injustice from the ages. I am a woman, a superwoman. Lives in every woman. To destroy my existence, you tried 100 times, but I will rise from the ashes and touch the sky. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Beautiful, beautiful. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Miniti Pradhan is our co-nurturer of Viswanidhan Center for Asian Blossoming.
Thank you.
And we are organizing a talk every Sunday, and she has so many poems, creative poems. Thank you so much. And art.
Thank you for your generosity of praise for me.
You know, we need a significant, presentation of art also, because art deals with greater transformation in society. So we have limited time. So now I would like to invite Dr. Devendra Kumar Tiwari to kindly share his view or, give a formal vote of thanks. So Dr. Tiwari, over to you.
Sir, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And it's my honor and privilege to express my greetings to everybody on the board and off the board. And as you have asked me to deliver this vote of thanks, sir, first of all, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to each one on the board from bottom of my heart. On behalf of Raffles University, Neemrana, Raise Global Foundation, Viswanidhan Center for Asian Blossoming, and Chetna Foundation, for the resource persons who have been a source of inspiration and motivation for this session. And in order to extend the vote of thanks, first of all, I would like to express my deep-felt gratitude to our guest of honor of today's session, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, for being a source of motivation and for the excellent talk on the decided topic. We have been very obliged to you, ma'am, for your benign presence and encouraging us by your benign thoughts. Thank you, ma'am, once again. Next, I would like to express my deep-felt gratitude to Professor Vinita Singh, HOD Sociology, Ranchi Women's College, Ranchi, for her wonderful talk on the topic. Ma'am, thank you once again for your benign presence. Next, I would like to express my deep-felt thank to Dr. Ruchi Goswami. Ma'am is founder and director of Dhwani, or Social Welfare Unit. Ma'am, your talk was also very inspiring and full of information. And I hope and I'm very sure that the audience will be benefited by your talk. In the series of our distinguished speaker, how can I forget to mention the contribution of Indu Sahu ji for her motivation and kind presentation on the given topic. Ma'am is chairperson of Chetna Child and Welfare Society, Raipur. In the series of expressing my deep-felt gratitude, I would also like to put on record the discussant like Professor Chanda Asani, Professor IIS deemed to be University Jaipur. And in the series of expressing my gratitude and conveying my vote of thanks, I would like to express my sincere thanks to Deepika Dave, the CEO of Raise Global Foundation, for being the source of motivation and inspiration. I am also thankful to the chairperson of Raffles University, Dr. Revered Justice Meena V. Gombar ma'am, for being the source of motivation. Next, I'm also putting on record the name of Honorable Vice Chancellor of Raffles University, Professor Diwakar Goli, for giving us freedom to organize such kind of activities. And from bottom of my heart, I would like to express and extend my vote of thanks to Minati Pradhan ji for her beautiful poem, and definitely an active participant in all the series of discussions. Last but not the least, I would like to express my deep-felt gratitude to all the participants from all over the world for their active participation and maintaining the decorum of the event. And finally, before I conclude, I would like to express my deep thanks to Professor Randhir Kumar Gautam, who is convener of this event, and for organizing and executing it successfully. I am thankful to you, sir. And lastly, I say thanks to each one of you from bottom of my heart. Have a nice time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.